Hello. Today I wish to talk about security, peace, and the current COVID-19 pandemic and offer some reflections as well as connections with my research and teaching. In the coming years, students and scholars of international security and conflict will be examining the dynamics and impacts of this crisis. Assessments already started on how the pandemic has created very peculiar conditions for re-eruption or worsening of existing conflict. Thus, with the failure of the United Nations Security Council to unite over a resolution on a global ceasefire, early assessment points at an unfortunate increase rather than a much hoped for decrease in organized violence. On the other hand, people around the world have endured multiple structural violence made complex due to the pandemic. In Libya, the violence of ongoing conflict itself is combined with the violence of economic hardship and by weak healthcare capacities to respond to COVID-19, made even worse by attacks on healthcare systems. The World Health Organization surveillance system, which is a database recording violent attacks on healthcare across the globe, makes for a sobering read. Elsewhere, already existing human insecurities have combined with government disregard in the context of the pandemic. For example, Brazil's indigenous peoples of Amazonia, facing environmental degradation, deforestation, and mining for quite some time, are now facing amplified risk of the virus, what some campaigners see as potential genocidal annihilation. However, I want to reflect on the unique status of the pandemic, what it has revealed and exposed about practices and discourses of security, political violence, and sovereignty. The latter and their relationship are my research interest more broadly, along with my concern with the politics of denial. I believe for us the pandemic today has served as a dramatic exposure test, helping reveal deeper seated dynamics and problems. Little itself in the current crisis is new, except for its biological basis. The pandemic exposes multiple crises and contradictions developing in global politics in the past few decades. It has exposed the futility of what Simon Delby on environmental security had dubbed spatial exclusion, inverted quarantine. The latter phrase is quite ironic in our context. While in a pandemic a literal quarantine is justified, a metaphorical quarantine, one of the political imagination and policy thinking, is the actual crisis of our time. This manifests itself in isolationism, in blame ascriptions, and even the emerging vaccine nationalism. This is the paradox of boundary thinking on a transboundary issue. Today we have the opportunity to explore overlapping forms of denial the politics of COVID is exposing. One is the denial inherent in the paradox just mentioned. Accepting the transboundary nature of issues leads to a sense of loss of control, while playing down the transboundary nature restores the comfortable certainties of external internal security, a false sense of control, while helping redraw imaginaries of a bounded nation state. We witness this through leaders denying or minimizing the existence of the virus within their borders, or engaging in blame ascription to sources elsewhere outside our borders. This is linked with another form of denial. The ideal of sovereignty as authority to rule premised on a social contract has been shaken to its core. We're witnessing how states of emergency declared on grounds of public protection have been abused and used to withdraw rather than provide protection in some places, how non-state groups have taken charge of protection above and beyond the state, but also how, for example in the US, far-right non-believers in COVID have demanded their own version of truth, their own spatial exclusions, their own denials. These trends call for a re-evaluation of sovereignty, perhaps a new ethos of sovereignty. In turn, the pandemic presents both intellectual and policy opportunities. It allows reconnecting the dots in national and global politics, across multiple issue areas. Things which in the past would have been analyzed, debated, and strategized over as distinct and separate, today demand synergetic approaches. For example, the pandemic allows making renewed linkages in practices and debates over environmental degradation, international arms transfer, and public health. These are themes we study in courses on security and peace and on diplomacy, and you, as current or prospective students of IDIC, will have the chance to explore and be part of the search for new thinking under the light the pandemic is offering us today. Thank you very much.